You're listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe, Director of Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. This is the Jewish Inspiration Podcast.
Now, my dear friends, welcome back to day number 69 of the Orchos Tzaddikim, Ways of the Righteous, in the Treasure for Life edition. We're in the middle of discussing happiness on page 405. When a person has any type of affliction or pain, Yismach Gamken, a person has to accept it with happiness and with joy. Our sages therefore said, Chavivim Yisurim, beloved are afflictions. As the Talmud says, all who rejoice in the afflictions bring salvation to the world. Why? Why? Because when I am tested and I pass the test, what does it do? It's a living example of godliness. What's the most inspirational thing you've ever heard about someone who is sick? They didn't complain about their pain. Right? We all heard stories of someone. They didn't want anyone else to suffer. They just accepted it with love because they knew it was God. You know, by the way, the only one who's not afraid of dying is the person who's sick in the hospital. Everybody around them, the family comes in, they're worried what's going to be. You ask them, how are you doing? They're like, I'm great. I'm at peace. And it's a gift that Hashem gives someone when they know that their time has come. They realize, my job now is to accept this pain with love. My job is now to accept it. Chavivim Yisurim, beloved are afflictions. Why? Because it perfects us. It brings us closer to Hashem. We ask that we not have pain and suffering, because it's much more comfortable for us to serve Hashem out of joy, out of happiness, not out of pain. God forbid it. We should never experience any. We should never feel any. We should never know of any. But it brings salvation to the world. A person should train himself to always say, this too is for the best. Gamzu l'tova. As well, the Talmud says, "O kol ma da'avid rachamana l'tav avid," that everything that the Almighty has done is done for the good. Ki yesh kama roos asher sofan tovos. There are many evils, many bads that are actually good at the end. And this is what the sages said on the verse, Odcha Hashem, I thank you, Hashem, ki onafta bi yashov apcha utenachameni. I thank you, Hashem, for having been angry with me. Your anger subsided and you consoled me. Sometimes Hashem, like a parent, sometimes we need to show a stiff hand to our child, not hitting them, God forbid. But you have to be firm. It's not pleasant for the child. But when we hold to that firmness, the child loves us more. Many people think, if I'm gonna discipline my child, if there's going to be a consequence, they're not going to love me, so I have to just let them do whatever they want. Wrong. 100% of the time, that's wrong. When you discipline your child, the child grows from it. The child loves to know where the border is. And if you don't give them the border, they'll keep pushing and pushing and pushing till they find it. It's analogous to a story of two men who were about to embark upon a voyage. One of them, a thorn embedded into his leg until he couldn't go anymore. The second one, Chavero nichnas lasfino la'avor, hitchil zeh lekalel es yomo leyamim shama shenitba'a pasfino. The second did go, and the first was so upset. Look how terrible. My friend ended up going on the ride. Sometimes I know the story, by the way, that happened on 9/11, 2001. Where an individual was on the plane leaving Boston that ended up in one of the towers. You know why? One of the towers hit 16 minutes later. It was supposed to be at the same time. You know why it was delayed? It was delayed because there was a man on that first plane that left from Boston that forgot his tefillin in the terminal. his phylacteries. He realized that when he sat down and he says to the stewardess, I'm sorry, I left something inside. She says, I'm sorry, you can't get off the plane. He says, I'm sorry, you're not leaving. I'm not leaving my tefillin there. I can't leave my tefillin there. She said, but you realize that if you get off this plane, you're not going to get back on it and you're going to lose your ticket. He says, I don't care. I'm not leaving my tefillin there. Imagine, I missed my flight. You saved your life. Now, again, we don't know the full justice of why the people who were on there, their lives had to end. That's not our calculation here. That's not our place to understand or to try to even figure out. But this individual I met, I heard the story from him. The rabbi in Jerusalem, he was visiting in the United States. So this person sees now I missed my ride on the Titanic because I had an injury in my leg. A few days later, he finds out that it drowned. And the people died. And then what happens? He says, oh Hashem, you actually saved me. Thank you for saving me. We have to see that we don't always understand the full picture. We don't see the full picture. We are looking very, 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 very micro. We're looking and we're analyzing this little one factor. You got to zoom out, and you see a big picture. Oh my goodness, wow. I missed the big picture. Therefore, even if a person is facing challenges, be happy in those challenges because it's part of your journey. Whatever it is. Oh, I lost my job. It's the worst day of my life. It's the best day of your life because you don't know what's about to come. You're only looking micro. Look at macro. Look at the big picture. Well, but we can't determine the outcome. We don't know the results at the end. That's what we're worried about. And this is what Nachum Ish Gamzu did when he always said, Gamzu l'tova, this too is for the good, this too is for the good. When he lost his donkey, he lost his candle, right? He lost his rooster, he lost them all. But it saved his life. A person could complain and could complain and could complain. Od Tov hasimcha l'sameach chasan kal is another form of happiness, which is the happiness that we make a bride and groom happy. Shenemar kol sasam kol simcha kol chasam kol kala. The happiness of the sound of gladness, the sound of joy, the sound of rejoicing of the bridegroom, and the sound of rejoicing of the bride. A person has to be very careful that it be appropriate, the way in which they make the bride and groom happy. It shouldn't be immoral. It shouldn't be inappropriate. It should be proper joy and happiness. And it shouldn't be intermingling of men and women at such an event. Kalus Rosh, because that can lead to terrible things. Amru anoshim levad v'noshim levad. We see in the Mishnah tells us that even at a place of mourning, right? So the men and the women shouldn't intermingle, which is a known Jewish concept, that men and women should limit their exposure to one another. Why? Look at the world today. Need I say more? If people understood what the Torah tells us, that is in the very nature of mankind, you wouldn't have all these scandals going on in the news today and every single day in the past 100 years, where the last 5 governors of the state of New York left in disgrace after having an extramarital affair. If there was a little bit of separation, perhaps that wouldn't have happened. The intermingling, it's nice that everything is co-ed, but look at what the problems end up happening in public schools. Look at what's going on. We're living in a world where there's no such concept of morality. In 7th grade. It's crazy. What world are we living in? Look at this. This is the Mishnah, 2,000 years ago. Even in a house of mourning. Oh, it's not laughter and mockery and joy of a wedding. Okay, that we understand. Keep them separate. so that the drunk guys and the drunk gals don't do anything inappropriate. Even in a house of mourning, the men and women should be separate. That doesn't mean you have to have brick walls. It doesn't mean that you have to have barriers that look like bulletproof, That's not what we're talking about. Limit the exposure to one another is a very important thing. Kol shekain b'shas hasimcha. We know that when people get a little drunk, they can be a little inappropriate. V'dorshinon v'atznei leches. Zos hatzoas hameis v'achnosas kala l'chuppah. And that which we learn to be modest, to walk in modesty, this is referring to accompanying the deceased. When we're involved with the deceased, it should be with modesty. And escorting the bride to her marriage canopy. When people assist in marrying off someone, marrying off a bride and groom, it should be done with modesty. All of the celebrations a person should have on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, on the holidays, on Purim. Why? Because they're all in the commemoration of our exodus from Egypt. And for all of the miracles that Hashem bestowed upon us. Therefore a person should be happy that he is able to recall the kindness of Hashem. And the unbelievable goodness that He has given us. And why are we happy on these days? Because it's revealing a tremendous closeness between us and God. Shabbos, Yom Tov, all the holidays, all the festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Why? Because Hashem took us out of Egypt. Shabbos, because God took us out of Egypt. You think of every holiday, many, many mitzvahs, to recall the exodus from Egypt. Oh, Hashem loves us. He took us out. So what do? We have a special mitzvah. Wear your finest clothes, have the finest foods, drink your finest wines to celebrate the love that Hashem has for us. Isn't that a great reason to be joyful? A person has to be cautious, though, that simcha, that joy, doesn't become craziness. But rather to be a joy and a happiness in our connection with Hashem. And a person should be delighted in the love of the Creator. That Hashem commanded us to be happy in these days. A person should also remember the pleasantness of Olam Haba. If we're enjoying so much in this world, physical, what's a second of the world to come? 1 millisecond of the world to come is greater than all the pleasures of this world, of all of humanity. All together combined. Doesn't even equal 1 millisecond of the world to come. So if we're enjoying great pleasure on Shabbos or Yom Tov, we should stop a second and say, if this is our joy here, imagine our joy there. Asherhu tachlis hani'imus, which is the greatest pleasures. V'noel la'odom be'esahi shemis'anig v'ta'anugim sheyiskor ha'ta'anugim agdolim v'yis'ava lahem k'dichsiv v'karos l'Shabbos oneg. When someone is celebrating any of the great, positive, proper celebrations, you should always remember the greatest pleasure of all, the delight of Shabbos. Oz tisaneg al Hashem, that you will delight yourself in Hashem. My dear friends, this concludes day number 69, and I look forward to continuing day number 70 on page 411 next time.
You've been listening to Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe on a podcast produced by Torch, the Torah Outreach Resource Center of Houston. Please help sponsor an episode so we can continue to produce more quality Jewish content for our listeners around the globe. Please visit torchweb.org to donate and partner with us on this incredible endeavor.